We're all kind of fascinated by power, right? The influence, the status, the control. It's what makes so much of the world go round. But what if everything we think we know about power is just, well, the tip of the iceberg? What if the real story is hidden deep beneath the surface?
So let's start with that big question. What is true power? Seriously, take a second. What's your definition? What pops into your head? Is it having a ton of money? Holding a high office? The ability to just walk into a room and command it?
For most of us, the answer probably sounds something like that. Power is the ability to shape the world around you, right? To make things happen, to get people to do things. It's an external game. And that makes total sense. On the surface, anyway. But what if that's all completely backward? What if real, true power isn't about controlling everything out there, but about the brutal, constant, disciplined suppression of everything going on in here? That's the core idea we're going to unpack today.
All right, let's begin our dive below the surface. We're going to depth 1, strategic isolation. This is a place where the normal rules of human connection get completely flipped on their head.
See, as you gain power, your relationships they change. They stop being about genuine friendship and they become transactional. Every conversation, every interaction gets filtered through this lens of strategy and utility. What does this person want from me? What's their real angle? And this creates something called the feedback vacuum. Think about it. When you have no power, people will tell you the truth because what have they got to lose? But once you're the boss, the truth suddenly becomes really expensive. So people start telling you what they think you want to hear, what's safe for them to say. You end up surrounded by mirrors, not windows, totally blind to what's really going on. This leads to what you could call a paranoia of kindness. A simple compliment? For a powerful person, there's no such thing. It has to be dissected. Is this person being genuine, or is this a calculated move to get on my good side? Living in that state of constant analysis, my gosh, it's exhausting. You completely lose the simple luxury of just taking things at face value. So the loneliness that comes with power, it's not a personality flaw. It's not because they're bad people. It's a structural problem. It's almost inevitable. Because in a world where every single interaction might be a strategic play, a truly authentic connection becomes a risk you just can't afford to take. Okay, let's go deeper. We're now at depth 2, necessary betrayal. This is where things get even darker and way more counterintuitive. We're talking about the idea that to hold on to power, a leader sometimes has to punish the very best people on their team. All of the business books tell you to hire people who are smarter than you, to build the best possible team. But in a cold, hard physics of power, your biggest threat isn't the person who keeps messing up. No, it's the brilliant, charismatic apprentice who's just a little too good at their job. And why is that? Well, because that super competent, well-liked number 2 starts to develop their own kind of political gravity. Slowly but surely, the team's loyalty, their attention, their trust, it can start to shift away from the leader and orbit around this new rising star. All of a sudden, you have a second center of power in the room. This forces the leader into a dark, secret calculation. Publicly, the goal is always what's best for the organization. But privately, the hidden reality is often about personal survival. The leader faces a choice. Do I promote this rising star and risk them eclipsing me? Or do I find a way to sideline them, to sabotage them, to maintain my own control? And most of the time, they're going to choose survival. The brutal truth is this. Your subordinate's talent is an asset, but only as long as it makes you look good. The second their brilliance starts to cast their own shadow, one that might fall over you, they stop being an asset and they become a target, one that has to be dealt with. We've now reached the third and final depths, the deepest, coldest, most pressurized part of power. This is what we call the iron mask, the absolute necessity of crushing your own emotions. Just think about this. We often define freedom as being able to say what you feel, right? Well, power is the exact opposite. You can't show real fear because it'll terrify your team. You can't show real anger because your rivals will figure out exactly how to provoke you. That vulnerability, the very thing we use to connect with other people, becomes a weapon that will be used against you. So how do you cope with that? Well, you have to split yourself in two. There's the internal self, that's the real you, the human being who feels doubt and pain and rage. But then there's the external avatar. That's the public symbol, the mask that has to project nothing but calm, certainty, and strength all the time.
And the psychological price of maintaining that split is just enormous. It is a performance that runs 24/7 with no breaks. You are constantly managing the gap between who you really are and who you have to pretend to be. There is never a moment you can just let your guard down. The mask never comes off.
And this is why the true master of power often isn't the loudest or most commanding person in the room. They're the quietest. They have disciplined themselves into silence, becoming a kind of void, a blank screen. This lets everyone else project their own hopes and fears onto them, and that, paradoxically, is what gives the leader the ultimate control.
Okay, wow. We've been to some pretty cold, dark depths. So let's come back up to the surface and bring all these hidden costs into the light. What is the real, ultimate price of wearing the crown? You know, looking from the outside, it's so easy to envy a leader. We see the status, the control, the perks. But once you see what's really going on underneath the surface, the isolation, the brutal choices, the emotional prison, your whole perspective shifts. Power starts to look a lot less like freedom and a whole lot more like a beautifully gilded cage. In the end, power isn't free. It demands a payment. It requires these three fundamental trade-offs. You have to trade intimacy for the sake of safety. You have to give up spontaneity in the name of strategy. And you are forced to trade truth for control. Which brings us to our final and I think very personal question. Now that you've seen what's under the water, now that you know the real price tag that's attached to that kind of ambition, do you still want the crown?